Welcome to Enlightened Omnivore, the podcast that serves up a delicious mix of food, sustainability, and travel. I'm your host, Steve Sabaker, here to explore the wonders of mindful eating. Join me each week as I dig into the stories behind our food system, discover new ways to live sustainably, and embark on culinary adventures around the globe or right in your own kitchen. Get ready to expand your palate and your mind, one bite at a time. This week on Enlightened Omnivore, I think I have one of the most compelling conversations I've had all year. I welcome forest therapy guide Sarah Abu-Absi to explore the healing power of simply being outside. Sarah went from a high-stress job in Chicago to developing Lyme disease, only to discover that nature itself was the medicine that her body was craving. We talk about how slowing down outside reboots the nervous system, eases pain, and reconnects us with what truly matters. If you're feeling run down, disconnected, or even overwhelmed, this episode is a gentle invitation back to yourself. Sarah, welcome to Enlightened Omnivore.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
All right, so let's get right into it because I'm fascinated by this topic of forest bathing and forest therapy. Tell us how you first discovered this as a therapy and what drew you to the work.
Yeah, so my background's in the environmental field. I worked for the City of Chicago Department of Environment and some other places in Chicago for, over a decade, helping people connect to the earth, save the earth,
That's a noble cause. I'm also that. Who's not for saving the earth?
Yeah. I was really excited about it. I still am, but I ended up getting pretty burnt out. It was a pretty high-paced job, lifestyle, and I ended up getting laid off when the mayor at the time shut down the whole Department of Environment due to budget issues. And then I was at home. I found myself at home with two young kids, huge lifestyle change, not sure what to do. And I ended up getting super sick with chronic Lyme disease, turned out to be, which I didn't find out for a couple years. And I was struggling. I was big time struggling. I don't even know if you know this, actually, but
I love hearing this story. This is what it's all about, the genesis.
Yeah. So, I went from super high energy, healthy as a horse, being able to do whatever I wanted, to just kind of trying to get through each day. And I was looking for anything to help me feel better. I wasn't getting great answers from my doctors, so many doctors. I was getting some when I tried a million medical interventions. But in the end, what helped me the most was stress relieving things, and especially being outside. I noticed that when I was outside, I felt the best, especially when I was at the beach. Because I didn't have any, my phone was away. The only thing I could do was just be there. When you're at the beach, you're in the sand, you're hearing the waves. There's so many feel-good sensory inputs. There's no to-do list or anything. It's just you're there at the beach. And I was gosh, I feel really good when I'm outside. There's probably something to this, which of course we all know there's something to being outside and feeling better when you're outside. But I didn't know that there was a training you could do to help people feel better outside and connect with nature. And it wasn't until I was actually on vacation in a small town in northern Michigan. And there was an actual real life newspaper, from in a small town. And it was front page below the fold news that there was a forest therapy walk happening, a guided forest therapy walk in that town. And I was huh? And it listed his training with the Association for Nature and Forest Therapy Guides. And I was oh, wow, you can get trained in this? This sounds amazing. So I looked it up and I fell in love right away. At that point, I had already been starting to explore different stress relief modalities that I could teach other people, because when I finally found some actually helpful stress relief modalities, besides my doctor being oh, see a therapist, or, take a bath or whatever, which was
or take a pill. I mean, that's often what a lot of them say, right?
Yes, which none of those were helpful. And now that maybe 12 years later, it feels like there are a lot more resources out there for people. But at the time, I was like, I literally didn't know what to do. Like, I didn't know how to feel better. But to answer your question, I saw this training, fell in love completely with it, and signed up for the next training I could, and got trained over the course of about a year, and then started trying to convince strangers to join me in the woods to sit around and do nothing. It's kind of how I like say it
Is that
flippantly.
is that how you would describe it? I mean, well, let's take a step back. I mean, what is forest therapy, or is it the same thing as forest bathing?
Yeah, so those two terms are often used interchangeably, and the real picky people would probably like draw out some nuances between the two, but I use them interchangeably. And the term forest bathing came from the Japanese practice of Shinrin Yoku, which translates loosely to forest bathing, kind of like bathing in the essence of a forest, kind of using your using your senses to just be in the forest and soak up all those physical, mental, emotional benefits. And the program I got trained in, which I think is one of the biggest and like one of the first in the States, definitely uses that as the inspiration, but also adds in the relational component. So yes, there's like the health benefits of just being outside, which we all need and we all get just by being outside, especially in a more intentional way. And then there's the relational piece of like how we relate to nature. So often we see ourselves as separate from nature, like we're managing it, we're fixing it, we're deciding what's wrong. And in a lot of ways, that's important because we do need to do a lot to help restore the earth and care for the earth. But it's easy to like just fall into that pattern of like, oh, I'm separate from it. Or, oh, it's like this thing to be managed. And so this practice just helps people remember that we are nature. We are part of nature. And like helps us really relate to nature in more than just our analytical minds, where we're like identifying species or, whatever, all of which is important. Again, don't get me wrong, that's important, but it's not everything. It's not the only way we relate to nature.
It's such a great point because I see this all the time when I go out in nature with other people. Folks bring their phones with their apps. They've got a list of birds they want to find. They're on a mission. They're looking at an Instagram photo, and there's this detachment, I feel like, where
Yes.
folks can't really connect with nature. I think that's kind of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So walk us through what does a forest therapy session look like?
Yeah. So I pick a location. It can be done anywhere. It doesn't have to be a forest. I do them in city parks. I do them on the lakefront. I do them in prairies. We could do them in the desert out by you.
Oh, good. That was my big question was, hey, do we have to do this where there's trees? No, it doesn't sound like it.
Oh, we could do it on a farm. You can do it on a balcony. You can do it looking out your window. I mean, it's cooler and more fun and more powerful if you can actually be outside. But people with limitations for whatever reason, they can't go outside. You can get a lot from the practice, even just doing it inside and bringing in a flower or a stone or a leaf and looking out the window. So you pick a location, and I invite people to bring like a blanket or a mat or a chair. And I like to find like a nice kind of cozy, grassy or sandy spot to sit. And after we settle in, maybe I'll share what we're hoping to get out of the experience or share how we're feeling or what brought us here. We greet the land. We do a land acknowledgement. I think any practice that is so close to the land, it's important to acknowledge that we are on stolen land. And also acknowledging all the caretakers of the land who make it possible for us to be wherever we are in that moment, especially the first land tenders, which in America are Native American tribes. Where I am, it's the Ottawa, the Ojibwa, the Potawatomi, and so many others. And how Native Americans relate to the land is a big inspiration for my offering of the practice and in my training as well. So many Native Americans and Indigenous people around the world are so much better at listening to the land, and like seeing so much more potential for relationship with like an individual tree or an individual leaf or, the sun or the sky. And so we do a land acknowledgement. And then I guide people in a sensory meditation, just helping people to tune down their analytical minds, which, are very, very top of mind, very busy for most people these days, myself included. Like, that's why I do this practice, is because I'm an overthinker.
Yeah, we spend so much time in our heads, I feel like. And so do you get a sense that this therapy is helping get folks more into that emotional connection, that heart?
Yeah, emotional, somatic, body, intuition, there's so many other ways of being besides our analytical minds that we've just gotten out of touch with. And so I spend a lot of time guiding people in this sensory meditation part. Every guide has their own style, and some people keep that part shorter and just kind of standing up. But I find that, yeah, these days people are just so locked in with their thinking minds that unless we take a long time to just let people sink in to their sensory experience, that they go, like when I let them off on their own to kind of go connect with nature, they go right back into thinking mode. And which is okay, it's not like wrong, but that's what so many of us spend the majority of our days in. And so we miss out on so many other ways to connect with nature.
And how long is one of these sessions?
Yeah, so they can be anywhere, in our training, they recommend 2 to 3 hours, which is long for people.
Yeah, that's
it,
impressive.
it flies by if I can actually get people to commit to 2 to 3 hours. But I often can't get people to commit to that long. People are busy, they have full schedules. So I will often say, okay, 90 minutes. I'll do 90 minutes or 2 hours, depending on the group size. But I love to have longer because a big part of it is not rushing through it. It's not like a performance-based practice, which is what so much of us are used to living in and functioning by. It's like, okay, we have an agenda. We have, actionable goals. We have, I'm supposed to get this out of it. And so it's hard to shift away from that, like achievement-oriented mindset.
So
And
what are the goals then that you're looking for? I mean, let's not say it's about achieving, but we talked about stress relief, but are there other things then that you're looking for as you have a client go through this process to know that it's really sinking in or that they're getting benefit of some kind from this therapy?
Yeah, I struggle with this question because I don't like to make it goal-oriented. But I do and this is also why I like working with individual clients one-on-one, because then they can share what they want to get out of it. And for some people, it's stress relief. And for some people, it is emotional expression. For some people, it is getting more in touch with their intuition. Some people, it's like, allowing some grieving to happen. For some people, it's like feeling like a kid again and just having fun. For some people, it's like wanting like a peak kind of like experience where it's like they like connect with this like awe, like out of body timelessness experience that happens sometimes. It's sometimes I also say like it's like forest therapy is like being on good drugs without the drugs, doing some mushrooms or some LSD where like you feel this dropping of boundaries. You feel more connected to the world around you. You feel like a timelessness. You feel like this deep awe and appreciation. It's like a different state, level of consciousness sometimes.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot about breath work and drumming, doing similar things. Do you use breath or music of any kind in your therapy?
I don't use music, although I have had people bring singing bowls and do that with me. I prefer to lean on the sounds in nature. And breathwork, I'm not like trained in like a type of breathwork specifically, but I do invite people to connect to their breath. I take more the approach of a kind of mindfulness, like present moment awareness, where we're not trying to do anything specific except to be with what is. And so to be with your breath and often just noticing your breath and like recognizing how we are breathing in what the trees are offering us, and we're breathing out and we're offering our breath to the trees and the leaves and all the other plant beings here. Just noticing that, like in a non-rushed way. Often people's breath will just naturally get a little deeper and slower. I'm not into forcing. And I appreciate like the other breathwork styles that are a bit more intentional about getting people to that altered state of consciousness. I just take a gentler approach. Like, I'm a very sensitive person, Steve.
That's good. I
I
mean, then you're in the
I
right job, you know?
I wish I could be like, or sometimes I wish I could be like the hardcore, yeah, like cold plunges, like sauna, all that. And sometimes I'll dabble in that, but my nervous system is like, whoa, buddy.
I always admire people that have a more sensitive nervous system because for so many years I abused my body, not really recognizing that what I was feeling. I mean, I would drink pots of coffee, I would get barely any hours of sleep, too much alcohol, too much exercise, too much extreme activities that really pushed my body, and I would never give it permission to rest. And now, at 47 years old, my body's telling me it's in charge now, and so I have to rest more. And it's been such a beautiful experience, sometimes very humbling and sometimes frustrating, but to see to get more out of an experience with doing less, without all these extra inputs. I feel like that's my experience when I got to do some forest therapy with Sarah a couple of years ago. And we did it in a public park, this beautiful public park. I wish we had parks like that in Southern California. And it was so interesting because it was in a group dynamic with a lot of relatives. And I was a little bit self-conscious, but I was also very distracted being in a new place, getting to visit with friends and family. And yet we really started to connect with nature. And so I'm curious, what are the dynamics with a solo experience or with a group? How do you keep a group grounded when there's so many other inputs going on?
Yes, it can be really hard with a group. Some groups, it just works out and it's like amazing where like people will just drop in right away. They'll settle into the moment and the place, and they'll have these like deep insights, and everybody feeds off each other, and people get emotional, and it's just beautiful and even more powerful and just doing it together. And then sometimes people will be like pretty chatty and like not really like want to drop into the experience or have trouble doing it for whatever reason. And like, I get that, I totally get that. But, and it's my job to not judge people's experience and how they're going through it, which can be hard sometimes. I'm like, I want you to like really just let yourself be rather than like, the mind going and chatting away. And so sometimes it happens, and I have to practice my own welcoming. Like, I have to practice what I preach, not always successfully, but because what I preach, for lack of a better word, is to welcome whatever is, welcome what arises. Like, if you have judgmental thoughts spinning and you're like annoyed with the sound of the traffic you can hear, like welcome that, annoyance, welcome those thoughts, and don't hang on to them so tight and like ride them along, but let them be there, let them be experienced, and then move along and come back to the present moment experience. So yeah, the question of the group versus individual, it's just different every time. And this morning I actually had a solo one-on-one, somebody who just couldn't find a group experience that worked for her schedule. We had never met, she just found me on the internet, and we're like, okay, let's meet at 8:30 a.m. at this random forest preserve. And I'm like, what am I doing? Sometimes I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah, you get like creepers on occasion,
I have not. And, I am blessed to feel confident in the woods, I know not everyone does. People have fears of being alone in the woods, especially in like urban woods, where stuff happens sometimes. But I feel very lucky that I don't have much fear around that because I don't have I haven't had an experience that has made me feel fear around that. But anyway, this morning, I met a person one-on-one, and I got to just hear about what she wanted to get out of the experience. I got to hear about, how she was stressed at work, how she has the tendency to overthink. And so I got to really meet her where she was at, and I got to understand a little bit about what she knows about the mindfulness practice. And, again, just meet her where she's at, and she could just really sink into the experience, and we could make it just what she wanted. And it was really cool and really powerful.
That sounds like a great way to spend a Wednesday morning, in my
Oh
opinion.
my God. Yes. Right. Because she works from home. And so she's like, okay, like I can start my work from home day an hour later and then work an hour later. And so that's one thing that I have noticed that is like kind of a challenge about this, is like how to get busy people to sign up to go spend some time in the woods without a real agenda. And I did my training in 2021 when it was like still pandemic vibes. And people were so excited to be outside, and people had more free time. And so it was a lot easier at the start in 2021. In 2022 is when I started offering it. And people are busier than ever now, it seems like.
It's like we forgot everything that we learned during
Right?
COVID. I mean,
Right?
as much as COVID was difficult, I think a lot of people did have a moment to take a breath, or they were forced out of their routine, or unable to just busy themselves with all the things that we do.
Mhm.
And I'm shocked how it doesn't, not only does it feel like we've gone back to the way things were, it's accelerated. So
Yeah.
for someone curious but skeptical about the values of forest
Yeah.
therapy, what's your best argument or story or anecdote to share, what the value is of this therapy?
I think it's a little different answer for everyone. For somebody who is more like data-driven, science-based, I will share some of the facts about the dozens or probably hundreds now of studies that show being outside is so good for our health. It's good for our immune system. It's good for our cardiovascular health. It's good for stress and anxiety and depression and our ability to focus. So many studies. It's like clear as day. Being outside is good and necessary. We evolved as humans to spend most of our time outside, and it's only in like the 0.001, I think, or is it 0.01% of recent human history that we spend most of our time inside. So our nervous systems have not caught up with how quickly we have spent our time inside. So just, from a scientific evolutionary standpoint, we need to spend more time outside if we want to feel better and live longer.
You talked about this a little bit earlier. I have a question about intuition or instinct. Can you talk a little bit more about that? How that's one of the things that people get a heightened sense of or a greater familiarity with? Because I think what you're saying is, yeah, human history of over 1 million years of evolution, and now we don't use any or very few of those skills that kept us alive and made sure we found food and shelter and kept us away from danger. But we don't have to rely on that anymore when we lock the door and turn the lights out and pull covers over us to go to sleep. So what are some of the intuitions or instincts that come out in your therapy sessions?
Yeah, so I think of it as kind of just getting in touch with our like somatic bodily experience. And our body sends us so many messages in the form of sensations, essentially, throughout every day that most of us just kind of stopped paying attention to because we are in our minds. And the only time we go to our bodies, often, many of us, is when something's wrong. Like when we need to fix or solve something. We have a pain or whatever it is, a stomach ache, a sore throat, or some issue that is an indicator that our nervous system and brain reads as that there's something wrong with our body and I need to fix it. And so there's been increasing evidence more and more in recent years that if we can go to our bodies and notice sensations through a lens of safety, essentially, where we're not going through this lens of like threat detection mode, where so many of us live when we're in fight or flight, like we're like, oh, okay, something's wrong. Oh, this is something I've got to fix. This is something I've got to solve, where many of us live in our day-to-day lives because that's how our worlds are designed. But if we can go to our bodies and notice the sensations through the lens of safety or like kind of like an openness or a friendliness or a neutrality, then we start to learn about what different sensations mean, whether they're connected to an emotion or, they give us information about what we like, what we want more of, what we want less of. And there's so much wisdom, essentially, or data or information in our bodies that we can listen to if we aren't driven by fear, if we aren't in the fight or flight mode. And so this is where there's an overlap with my more recent job and one of my paths of being a pain recovery coach, where so much science is showing that simply by turning to our chronic pain through this lens of safety, which we can access much easier in nature. We can like watch the leaves blowing in the wind, or we can watch the water glistening like in a puddle or whatever it is. And we can be like, oh, that's cool. Like we can look at it just like we aren't trying to fix or solve or change that. We're just like letting it be there as it is. And if we can use that same kind of lens, the sensations in our bodies, then over time, the neural pathways that associate like sensations in our bodies with fear and then give pain, those will dissolve over time. And the pain dial gets turned down. So it's so exciting. It's so cool. We could have another podcast about this, although it's probably not as relevant for yours. But
I'm completely fascinated right now.
oh
So
my
I
God.
think what you're telling me is, well, what is it that the pain exists, but you can turn down the intensity, or is this pain that we are manifesting through stress or through fear?
Both.
Okay.
We don't always know which is which until we start doing the practice, but sometimes you do. Yeah.
Interesting. So you kind of unpack that, identify that modality, and then use forest therapy to address the pain directly.
Yes. Yes. I haven't like been able to yet find like most of my pain recovery clients are over Zoom. So we incorporate a little bit of forest therapy and that they can kind of do on their own. But at the times when I have been able to bring pain recovery clients to the forest, it's amazing, so powerful. But even if you don't have pain, there's ways that you can benefit from that, from going toward your body through this lens of safety. Which is like essentially mindfulness, like the Zen Buddhism approach of mindfulness, where you're just kind of noticing and you're not reacting, you're not catastrophizing, you're not associating it with fear or danger. You're just noticing.
Yeah, observation.
Yeah, and feeling.
That's one of the things I think I get the most out of being in nature now. I remember I always loved to hike. I prefer hiking over running. And it is a little bit slower and a lot less exertive. So I have a little bit more consciousness of my surroundings.
Yes.
But I'm also normally not paying that much attention when I've got that hour to get in a hike and I want to try to beat my last record or whatever.
Yes.
But I notice every time about 30 minutes in, I'll see something on the trail, and I hike the same trails every time, maybe 3 trails in my area. I'm really lucky that we've got lots of great places to hike.
Mm-hmm.
But I pick the same 3 most of the time just for timing. I know how long it'll take me to finish. Mm-hmm. And about halfway through, I always notice something I've never seen before. It happens almost every time. And I
Yes.
feel like it delays for me, but I do get that awareness, that new awareness that, how is it that I've hiked this thing dozens of times and never noticed this tree or this turn in the trail or, this rock with this really cool colored pattern? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yes. Yes. So much of this practice is about slowing down and just noticing or paying attention. Like one of my inspirations for this practice is a Native American author and professor, ecologist, Robin Wall Kimmerer.
Of
She wrote books,
course.
and she says paying attention is a form of reciprocity with the living world. And so all we're trying to do in this practice is really pay attention and not even do anything with that. I mean, yes, like later, action is very, very important, but just giving yourself a little bit of time to let noticing be the action, to let that be the thing. And you don't need to automatically do anything with it or solve anything with it. And so that does so much for our own bodies, where we can bring in more pauses between like observation and action. And then there's also the argument or the idea that some people believe, especially Robin Wall Kimmerer is one of my inspirations, where she talks about, like that being an act of care for the earth by noticing the earth, like through like these eyes of kind of just care and like letting them be, and or maybe awe or whatever it is, but non-judging, that maybe the earth like notices that. Maybe the earth appreciates that. And so I know some people bristle at that, and like my analytical mind bristles at that. So I'm not trying to like convince anyone of that necessarily, or like I don't need anyone to believe that when we do this, but I bring up those possibilities or those beliefs that some people believe throughout the practice. I just sprinkle them in just to see what it feels like to see how that might change both how you feel and how you interact with the earth. So how is that landing for you? It lands differently for people.
No, you've landed the plane for me. I'm there. I mean, I have had the fortunate life that I have a cabin up in the desert, and I write about it, or my experiences up there, where I get to go up by myself and spend 24 hours in nature almost every week. And I have never missed a sunrise if I'm there. Like, if I get up there, sometimes I just go for the day. But if I stay the night, I have never missed a sunrise. And my porch faces the sun as it comes up. And I think I may have mentioned this on other podcasts, but basically, I have seen how the sun comes up throughout the seasons, that now I totally understand this concept of knowing what time of year it is based on the position of the sun rising, which I'd never experienced in my life. But now that I have a place that I can see on the horizon where the sun comes up, it's a calendar. It's basically telling me this little notch in the valley, that tree over on the end, there's this beautiful spot where a Joshua tree and a rock are basically right between the sun comes up for the solstice, for the longest day of the year, right in between. And I now know so much more about how our ancestors thought about these cosmic events and how practical they are, but also how kind of embedded in our DNA they are.
Yeah.
And so the sunrise I'm a horrible meditator. I have tried all kinds of modalities.
Mm-hmm.
And the only one that works is to sit in my chair with my cup of coffee and watch the sun rise. And it takes about 20 minutes for me to, once I get out there, and I still haven't figured out I can't tell quite when the sun's going to come up. So I get out a little early. I sit in my chair. It's often freezing cold, even in the summertime. So I'm bundled up and I watch as the sun slowly rises. And I'll tell you, the most magical moments have been when those rays of sun hit me and I can feel the temperature change immediately. And I can hear the wind change as the cold air warms up and starts to move. I can feel weather. And it's like how our ancestors knew that all along and experience that every day of their lives.
Yeah.
And we don't get to very often. Some people only experience it once or twice. I mean, I get to experience it several times a year, and I know that's unique, but it has absolutely shaped my perspective on how nature is medicine and how we have to be more connected to nature before we can understand it, and definitely before we can try to change things. And I feel like the climate change motivations and the environmental movements have been incredibly important, but there's only a handful of the thought leaders that I think truly get what's going on. It's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about regenerative agriculture, because I think it's trying to mimic nature, not fix or replace nature, and using the systems that are already in place that are super efficient. You know, I just read this. I just read this quote. I'm going to get it wrong, but it's like, nature never hurries, but it still accomplishes everything.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yep.
You know, and it's like, holy crap. Like, I try so hard to get everything done in a day, and I always feel like I never accomplish it. But nature is never rushing around. It's using these incredibly efficient and balanced systems that have been perfected over billions of years. And it gets shit done every day, and more shit done than any of us can. I mean, it produces more solar energy. It's producing more carbon dioxide and oxygen through respiration and photosynthesis. It's the energy in the waves that are crashing on the shores around the planet is more than any nuclear power plant could create. And yet it does it so damn effortlessly. And I'm like, why aren't we just looking to nature for those examples and to live by those means? And anyway, so you've got me hooked. I'm absolutely on board.
Awesome. So I want to make one distinction, just piggybacking on what you're saying. So I'm like, activism is super important to me. Like, caring for the earth is super important to me. You know, it's like my dream job, my career, you know, my major in college, like, it's still a big part of my life. And I think there are a lot of different ways to help people find their own role in activism, caring for the earth, all those things. And you made the point about really having that observational piece and like really learning from the earth, which I totally agree with, you know? And this practice of slowing down allows people to do that a bit more. But there's also an element to this practice that I would maybe even put more important for this practice specifically, in not observing to figure out. Because again, that's important, but like kind of separate from this practice. But observing just to observe and just to witness, just to let it land in your body, like as a human being in nature. And also to feel your love for the earth and feel the love from the earth.
What does love from the earth feel like to you?
For me, it's a feeling in my body, you know, like similar to like, you know, getting a hug or like a nice note from a friend or whatever. It's like a warmth. I feel like a warmth in my heart, literally. And like often throughout my whole body. Often tears will come to my eyes, or I will feel like understood, like I'll feel seen, I'll feel loved. And, you know, which reminds me, I want to read a quote from like another one of my influences here, J. Drew Lanham, who wrote The Home Place, Memoirs of a Colored Man's Love Affair with Nature. This point kind of about like belonging, like how we all belong in nature. Like the trees aren't like judging us. But he says, in all my time wandering, I've yet to have a wild creature question my identity. Not a single cardinal or ovenbird has ever paused in dawn song declaration to ask the reason for my being. White-tailed deer seem just as put off by my hunter friends' whiteness as they are by my blackness. Responses in forests and fields are not born of any preconceived notions of what should be. They lie only in the fact that I am.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
So I may have got off track of like the original point, but just this feeling of belonging is such a huge part. And, I think people feel that in different ways. People can like think through it intellectually, like in like reading books and understanding that, yeah, trees don't judge. But then also people feel it in their bodies. It's like a good feeling, which again, so many of us are disconnected from our bodies. So we don't like notice when we like really feel good or notice what helps us feel good. um, and so, yeah, it's a feeling. That's why I called my business That Forest Feeling.
I love that. Yeah. So we were talking about pain and fear, and then now belonging. I mean, there's such a plague of loneliness out there.
Mm,
I've written about it for myself. I mean, it took me a long time to comprehend that the difference between loneliness and solitude.
mm,
I didn't realize that I could be by myself and still be okay.
right.
And,
Yeah.
for me, that was less about fear,
Hmm.
but it was really that question of belonging. And, I mean, I could sit on the couch and you could ask me some more questions, but the point is more, if we can see those connections and systems in nature, there's such a beautiful way that nature works with all of the components that are going on out there. I mean, I don't even really have a sense of, like you said, like, I don't know what I'm feeling when I'm feeling solitude in nature, other than it feels whole and it doesn't feel lonely and
Mm,
it doesn't feel scary and
mm.
it feels like I'm right where I'm supposed to be. And so maybe that's a little bit of what you're talking about.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's it. And it's feeling, so it's like hard to put it into words, and we all use kind of different words to describe it, but that's what you said totally rings true to me and reminds me of that feeling I get in my body when I go to the forest or someplace in nature and just let myself be like as I am. We don't need to
Mm.
like pretend. We don't need to like make sense. We don't need to whatever, It doesn't matter like what we're wearing or what we look like, any of those things.
So switching gears a little bit, I talk a lot about food. We talk a lot about
Yes.
cooking. I'm
Yes.
curious, do you have any ways of connecting forest therapy to food, to cooking, to meals?
Yes. So usually I end with a little tea ritual where I often will bring in some snacks. And so part of my training was to learn how to forage edible tea leaves, um, or just different herbs that you could, put in some hot water and make something to drink. And it is illegal to forage in most places around here, that I guide. So I grow in my backyard and in my front yard different pollinator plants that are good for the local ecosystem here, because that's like one of the ways I show love to the earth is by planting native plants and, caring for native habitat, pollinator habitat. So I grow those and I harvest them before I go out to guide, and I bring a little thermos with some hot water and steep some, various leaves like anise hyssop or mountain mint, and add a little honey, and then we close out and have some little wooden cups and we sit in a circle and I pass out the tea and I invite people to like connect with gratitude. I always start with gratitude and I end with gratitude for the land and people that care for the land and ourselves and all those things. And we practice being in relationship with the earth through, what we eat and drink, because what we eat and drink is nature. Hopefully, hopefully at least some of what we eat. I know if it were up to you, it would all be, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And so, yeah, hopefully at least some of the time we're, consuming nature. And so, I was raised in a household of like fast eaters, fast talkers, fast walkers, fast eaters. And so I'm always hungry. And when I'm around food or drink, I just have the tendency to just like slurp it up, down it as fast as I can. And so this practice just helps me and the people I'm with slow down a little bit and, kind of like use our other senses before we go to our sense of taste, sense of smell, obviously, even a sense of touch, play around with our sense of hearing. Why not? And, connect to our gratitude for what the earth is providing for us. And often we'll pour out a little sip of tea, like our first sip of tea as a gesture of reciprocity to the land. Reciprocity is a big theme throughout this practice. We're always giving and receiving to and from the earth. And so, how can we be in nurture that reciprocal relationship with the earth? There's a million ways to do it.
I love it.
And then we sip, and then I'll often share, or sometimes I'll share for the longer ones, I'll share a snack, something just super simple, like, some walnuts or some dried fruit or some chocolate. And it is amazing how good a simple walnut will taste after you've been like mindfully just being in the woods for an hour and a half. Like, it tastes so good. And I wish I could like actually eat mindfully like every day, every meal of my day, but it's hard. So like just carving out this little time where we have like built up all this like slowing down and present moment awareness. It's like, woof, it is really powerful.
Fantastic. So you're based in the Chicago area.
Yeah.
If someone wanted to do a forest bath with you, how do they get a hold of you?
So my website is www.thatforestfeeling.com.
That forest feeling.
Yes. I'm on Instagram too. I'm less and less active on social media, but I would love to hear from anybody. I also have like a guided meditation on Insight Timer for anybody who uses that app. You can look up my name, Sarah Abu-Absi. It should show up, but I think it's called Finding Comfort in Knowing That the Earth Loves You. And so if, time you can't get outside and you still want to connect with the earth, listen to this 7-minute meditation and just kind of drop into your sensory experience a bit and kind of like tap into how it feels to be loved by the earth, and like how it feels when you open up to that possibility.
And how common is forest bathing? How many therapists are there around the country? Like if somebody lives in another part of the US, how do they find a forest bathing therapist?
So I will offer a slight correction because we're not considered therapists because we don't want to give the impression that we're like diagnosing or treating anyone. So we call ourselves guides.
Okay.
And we one of my teachers says the forest is the therapist and the guide opens the doors. So
I love that.
Yeah, there to help people connect with nature, learn from nature.
So your fellow guides, where can we find them?
They are all over. They could go to the Association for Nature and Forest Therapy Guides and Programs website. There's also a website called Forest Bathing Finder, but they're all over. They're all over the world, which is cool.
That is so cool.
Yeah, you can do this on your own for sure.
Well, that was my next question was like, if folks want to integrate forest therapy into their life, say like on the weekends or in the mornings, oh my God, to do this in the morning just before I start my day, what are some simple actions or basic ways they can do that and bring it into their lives without a guide?
Yeah. So, if you can find a guide to do it like once or twice, at least with a guide, it can make it easier and more powerful to do it on your own. But even if you can't or don't, ideally setting aside distractions, turning your phone off or leaving it inside, even if it's for like 5 minutes and you go out on your balcony or in your front yard or whatever and connect with your senses. It's kind of a popular thing even for like anxiety or stress is to like, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell, 2 things you can taste, the senses. Connect to those. If you notice thoughts, let them pop up and let them pop away. You don't have to follow them. You don't have to hang on to them. Come back to your breath. One that I like is to notice what's in motion, after you've connected with your senses. Just kind of like, again, notice what's in motion and let that be the only thing you're trying to do. Not do anything with it, but you can notice some leaves fluttering or there's often very subtle motion that we miss out on that can just feel really good to just like tune into. And then maybe can start like inspiring you to move in different ways even. Hugging trees is one of my favorites.
I love it. We can be tree huggers, and
Yeah.
it's cathartic. It has just listening to you, I'm getting all of these images in my head, and it's a beautiful feeling that I can't wait to go outside now today because I feel like I'm going to have a completely different perspective.
Yeah.
Looking ahead, kind of what's your hope for folks and how forest therapy integrates more into our daily lives, into our health, our community? I mean, do you have thoughts of like where this could go over the next decade or two?
Yeah. I mean, I would love to make it easier for people to do. I'd love for it to be free for people. I would love to still get paid to do it and that other people don't have to pay. It's cool. Like when sometimes my forest preserve district will pay me to do it and then people can show up for free. And so just increasing access to it. I'm also in conversations with a doctor who wants to offer it as part of a treatment plan for people with stress, with PTSD, um, with cardiovascular issues, whatever it is. And how cool would it be to like have your doctor write you a prescription for forest bathing or forest therapy
Oh my gosh.
and have your insurance cover it? And, I know it gets complicated with that, but that's kind of what's happening with the mindfulness approach for chronic pain recovery is it used to be that people used to have to like find these like, niche people online and pay heftily for a session to get some real like compassionate, personalized support for pain recovery. And now more and more clinics are incorporating it into their mainstream medical relationships and collaborative care plans, and people are able to get it for free using their health insurance.
I hear you. I am a big believer in how nature is medicine, and if we could have more programs like this that Western medicine and kind of general society encouraged, I mean, it's like literacy, right? It's like understanding nature, natural literacy, and really learning these things that our ancestors have known all along, and that so many self-help people are now co-opting and identifying as ways to get people engaged. But folks like you giving this authentic, accessible, beautiful experience with nature, reducing pain, reducing stress, giving us joy, like sign me up. Let's do it. So thank you so much,
Steve.
Sarah.
Oh my gosh, I just remembered, sorry, one thing that
Yeah.
I started. This was my trains of thought. Another motivation of me doing this is that people will then be re-inspired and reinvigorated to take action to care for the earth in like so many myriad ways, whether it's through like sustainable agriculture or climate change, voting, and so many different ways that people can take action and need to take action. Instead of doing it from a place of like fear, urgency, like pressure, they do it from a place of love.
I couldn't have said it better. I couldn't have said it better. I hope I aspire and hope that conversations like this have influenced the next generation of leaders to tell us, okay, here's how we need to address incorporating or interacting with nature in a more regenerative and reciprocity, where we're actually giving back what we're receiving. We're acknowledging what we're receiving and we're giving back in gratitude for those gifts. That's all we need out there, right?
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for taking time with me today. It's been a fascinating conversation. I am excited I'm going to find a forest therapist here close by because I need to do another session. I'm sure
Heck yeah.
everyone wants to learn. But check out Sarah's website at thatforestfeeling.com and get out there on the internet, it sounds like, and find someone close to you if you're not in the Chicago area. And get outside, get some of nature's medicine, and let's continue to learn what Mother Nature's been showing us every day of our lives, that being out there, being a part of nature, not observing as something separate from nature, but actually embracing, just go hug a tree, right? That's what Sarah said. So I really encourage everyone, get out there, touch dirt, and maybe you'll learn something about yourself in the process. So thanks
Beautiful.
again.
Thank you, Steve.
Oh, you're a gift to all of us, Sarah. Thank you so much for what you do.
I gotcha.
All right, take care.
Okay, you too.
And that wraps up another episode of Enlightened Omnivore. A special thanks to all my subscribers for listening in this week. You can all read more about everything omnivorous on my weekly Substack newsletter found at enlightenedomnivore.substack.com. We continue to uncover the stories behind our food and the new ways we can live sustainably together. Thank you for tuning in. This is Steve Sabaker reminding you to savor every bite and eat mindfully. Until next time, keep it balanced and stay enlightened. This is Enlightened Omnivore, everything in moderation.